The night it all began, Margaret Whitfield thought she was walking into a celebration. Her daughter, her son-in-law, and her beloved grandson had invited her to dinner at the Riverside Grill, one of Portland's most elegant restaurants. She had dressed carefully, wearing the pearl earrings her late husband had given her on their 20th anniversary. For Margaret, it was more than just a meal. It was a reminder that family still mattered, that she hadn't built her entire life's work in vain. At 72, Margaret had weathered storms most people couldn't imagine. She had built a modest real estate business from the ground up, survived the sudden death of her husband, and raised her only daughter, Claire, with the kind of devotion that left little room for herself. If there was one thing she believed in, it was loyalty, the invisible thread that bound family tighter than blood ever could. That evening, she stepped through the restaurant's glass doors. Margaret believed she was walking into a moment of renewal. The past few years had been strained whispers of disagreements over money, uneasy conversations about inheritance, her daughter's growing dependence on her ambitious husband, Daniel. But Margaret clung to hope. Families fractured, yes, but they could heal. She didn't know then that within hours her trust would be shattered, her very safety threatened, and the person she least expected would become her only defender. What began as a quiet dinner would unravel into betrayal so sharp it cut through decades of sacrifice. And in the middle of it all stood her grandson, Ethan. The young man she loved most in the world. Margaret had always worried Ethan was drifting too close to his parents' shadow, perhaps even conspiring with them. But that night, when the mask of love finally slipped away, the truth stunned her. The villains she trusted the most sat across from her, smiling, while the one she doubted was the only one willing to risk everything to save her. The Riverside Grill shimmered that night, its golden chandeliers reflecting off polished marble floors. Waiters in crisp black vests floated between tables, balancing silver trays heavy with wine glasses and porcelain dishes. Margaret took her seat at the round table by the window, where the Willamette River sparkled under the city lights. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe in the elegance and imagined she was simply another grandmother enjoying a family night out. "Mom, you look lovely tonight," Claire said, leaning across the table to kiss Margaret's cheek. Her voice was smooth, but there was a stiffness in her smile that Margaret had seen before. Usually when Claire wanted something, Daniel, tall and broad-shouldered, pulled out his chair with a little too much confidence. He wore the smug grin of a man who always believed he was the cleverest in the room. Ethan slid into the seat beside Margaret. He was only 20, but his tall frame and quiet demeanor gave him an air of maturity that often surprised her. Tonight, though, he seemed restless. His leg bounced under the table, his eyes flicked toward his parents, then away, then toward the entrance. "Shall we toast?" Daniel lifted his glass of Cabernet. "To family and to new beginnings." Margaret raised her glass, though she felt a tiny knot form in her stomach. New beginnings. The phrase clung to her like a shadow. Dinner arrived, filet mignon, roasted duck. A selection of wines so expensive, Margaret instinctively calculated their retail price in her head. Conversation flowed easily at first. Daniel boasted about his latest business opportunity. Claire chimed in about the potential profits. They painted vivid pictures of international markets and breakthrough technologies, each word crafted like bait on a hook. Margaret listened politely, though she'd heard it all before. Skims dressed as dreams. Investments that dissolved like smoke. But what unsettled her wasn't Daniel's rehearsed pitch. It was Ethan. The young man barely touched his food. His eyes darted constantly, like someone waiting for an alarm to sound. When Margaret asked about his classes, he answered with clipped words, then glanced back at his parents. Something was gnawing at him. Halfway through dessert, Daniel leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Art, there's something we'd like to discuss with you. A private opportunity. One that could change everything for this family." Here it was. Margaret set down her fork, keeping her expression calm. Go on. But before Daniel could continue, Ethan suddenly grabbed her arm under the table. His grip was firm, almost desperate. His lips barely moved as he whispered, "Grandma, we need to leave now." Margaret blinked, startled. She turned slightly, but his eyes stopped her cold wide, fearful, urgent. "What are you talking about?" She whispered back, "Ta, please," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "Trust me, something's very wrong." Claire's laughter rang out as she poured more wine, oblivious to this silent exchange. Daniel's gaze, however, flicked toward them, sharp and suspicious. Margaret felt her pulse quicken. She had never seen Ethan like this before. In 20 years, the boy had never lied, never misled her. "Ethan," she began softly. But he was already standing, tugging at her hand. "We have to go." Voices called after them as chairs scraped the floor. Guests turned to stare. Margaret, confused and embarrassed, followed him past the Mater D and out into the cool night air. The parking lot stretched dark and quiet, the muffled sounds of laughter and music fading behind them. Margaret pulled her arm free, her heart pounding. What on earth is going on? Ethan's face was pale under the streetlight. He glanced back toward the restaurant doors, then leaned closer. "Grandma," he whispered, "they're not here to celebrate you tonight. They're here to ruin you." The night air bit against Margaret's skin as she clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her breath came in shallow waves, not from the cold, but from the panic rising in her chest. She stared at Ethan, the boy she had cradled as an infant, the young man who had always seemed gentle, steady, and now here he was, trembling like a hunted animal. "Ruin me," Margaret whispered, her voice almost breaking. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" Ethan glanced over his shoulder again. Restaurant doors opened briefly, spilling light onto the parking lot, then shut. He exhaled sharply, as though every second outside was borrowed time. "They want your house," Ethan said finally. "And not just the house, everything. Your savings, your accounts." "Grandma, they've been planning this for months." Margaret blinked. For a moment, she felt almost foolish. Claire was her daughter. Daniel, though arrogant, was still family by marriage. Surely Ethan was mistaken. "You don't know what you're saying," she replied, her voice quivering. "Claire wouldn't, she would." Ethan's words cut through her protest like a blade. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. "I overheard them last week. They didn't know I was home. They were talking about how to convince you to invest in some fake company Daniel's setting up. He doesn't have partners, Grandma. There's no business. It's a scam. Once you sign those papers, everything will be gone." Margaret's mind swirled. She remembered Daniel's rehearsed smile, the wine glasses clinking, the phrase he'd used, "new beginnings." It had sounded so celebratory, but now it took on a chilling undertone. "You're serious," she said slowly. Ethan nodded hard. "I didn't know what to do. If I confronted them, they'd know I'd been listening. They'd cut me off. So I thought, maybe tonight I could get you out before they pressured you into agreeing." Margaret's hands tightened around her shawl. "But why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan's eyes glistened. "Because I wasn't sure you'd believe me. You love Mom. You've always given her the benefit of the doubt." "But, Grandma," he swallowed, lowering his voice, "this isn't just about money. Daniel said if you resisted, they'd find a way to make you legally incapable of managing your estate. They've already spoken to an attorney." Margaret's breath caught. The words "legally incapable" echoed in her mind like a death sentence. Her independence, her dignity stripped away with a single signature. The restaurant door opened again. Daniel's silhouette appeared briefly before stepping back inside. Margaret stiffened. Ethan grabbed her elbow, guiding her toward the far end of the parking lot. "We can't go back in there," he whispered urgently. "Not tonight." Margaret's voice cracked. "Ethan, if what you say is true, then Claire my own daughter. I know," he said, softly, "and I hate it. But you need to face the truth. She's not looking out for you anymore." Silence stretched between them. filled only by the distant hum of traffic. Margaret's heart wavered between disbelief and dread. Claire had been difficult, yes, always wanting more, always chasing comfort, but malicious, ruthless. That was harder to accept. And yet Ethan's terror was real, written plainly across his face. Then why tonight? Margaret asked finally. Why not another day? Ethan hesitated. Because the paperwork's ready. Daniel has it in his briefcase. They were going to bring it out after dessert. Once you signed, there'd be no going back. Margaret's stomach churned. She remembered the way Daniel had leaned forward, lowering his voice, a private opportunity. Her hands trembled, not from age, but from fury she hadn't felt in years. All right, she said at last, her voice steadier than she felt. We won't go back. But Ethan, she turned to him, her eyes narrowing with maternal sharpness. If you're lying to me, if this is some twisted story, I'm not, Ethan interrupted, his voice raw. I'd never lie to you. You're the only one in this family who ever cared about me. Margaret felt her chest tighten. Its words weren't rehearsed, weren't smooth like Daniel's. They were jagged, torn from somewhere deep inside. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from Claire lit up the screen. Where are you? Daniel's waiting to show you something. Don't make a scene. Margaret's hand went cold. She looked at Ethan, then back at the glowing message. Every instinct screamed that the boy beside her was telling the truth. And for the first time that night, Margaret realized she wasn't afraid of Ethan. She was afraid of going back inside. Margaret's fingers tightened round her phone until her knuckles whitened. The message from Claire glowed like a trap she could no longer ignore. See. Ethan whispered urgently, his eyes darting toward the restaurant. She's pushing you. It's happening tonight. Margaret didn't respond right away. She tucked the phone back into her bag, her mind racing. For 70 years, she had prided herself on spotting deception from neighbors spinning gossip, from salesmen knocking at her door, from politicians on TV. But to suspect her own daughter? That was a wound deeper than any betrayal. Ethan guided her toward his car, an old sedan parked beneath a flickering light. The boy's hands still shook as he unlocked the passenger door. Get in, Grandma. We'll go somewhere safe. Just for tonight. Margaret hovered by the door. Something inside her resisted. Running felt cowardly. She wanted answers, not just fear. Ethan, she said firmly, I need proof. I can't just accept your word and disappear. If what you're saying is true, then I must face it head on. I won't let them corner me, but I won't run blindly either. Ethan's eyes flickered with hesitation. Then, as if making a decision, he pulled his phone from his pocket. Proof? He said quietly. His thumb tapped the screen. Then he handed it to her. Margaret squinted at the recording. Grainy audio crackled from the speaker. Claire's voice emerged, low and clipped. She'll believe whatever I tell her. Daniel just needs the signature. After that, it's ours. Then Daniel's chuckle followed. It's just old Claire, sentimental. We just keep reminding her this is about family, about legacy. She won't resist. Margaret's stomach lurched. The voices were unmistakable. Her daughter, her son-in-law, plotting against her with casual cruelty. Her knees weakened and she gripped the car door to steady herself. Ethan's hand hovered, uncertain whether to touch her shoulder. I wanted to tell you sooner, he said softly. But I thought maybe I could protect you myself. I didn't know how. Margaret closed her eyes. She remembered Claire at 5 years old, clutching her doll at 20, storming out after an argument. At 40, calling only when she needed money. And now, 52, scheming to strip her own mother bare. God forgive her, Margaret whispered. She's my child. The parking lot suddenly filled with the sound of footsteps. Daniel's voice rang out, smooth and commanding. Margaret snapped her head up. Daniel was approaching, his tailored suit sharp even under the harsh light. His smile was practiced, but his eyes narrowed when he saw Ethan standing beside. There you are, Daniel said evenly. Claire's worried sick. Why did you leave? Margaret straightened, hiding the turmoil twisting her insides. I needed air, she replied calmly. It was warm inside. Daniel's gaze shifted to Ethan. And you, he said, his tone dropping. Whispering poison in her ear again, Ethan stiffened. I'm telling her the truth. She deserves to know what you're planning. Daniel's laugh was short, sharp. Truth? You think anyone believes a boy with your history? The drinking? The ditzies, Margaret? Don't look so shocked. He's been taking cash from your purse for months. Margaret froze. That's not true, she said automatically, though her voice wavered. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes gleaming. Ask him where the $200 went last winter. Or the watch you kept in the drawer. Ethan's face flushed. I was going to replace it. He faltered, his words tumbling. But that's not the point. He's twisting it, Grandma. He's the liar here. Margaret's chest constricted. Two versions of reality collided before her eyes. On one hand, the cold recording on Ethan's phone. On the other, Daniel's accusations, sharp, plausible. Aimed at Ethan's weakest spots. Enough, Margaret said, her voice shaking. She raised her hand, silencing both of them. I will not be cornered in a parking lot like a fugitive. Tomorrow morning, I want every document, every proposal. And I will review them with my attorney. If either of you objects, I'll know the truth. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he smiled thinly. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. He shot Ethan a look filled with venom, then turned back toward the restaurant. Claire will be disappointed. She hoped for a celebration tonight. But we'll manage. As his footsteps receded, the air grew heavy again. Margaret felt her pulse in her ears. Ethan turned to her desperately. Don't believe him, Grandma. Please. That's exactly what he does. He twists everything. He'll make you doubt me until you give up. Margaret's hand trembled as she reached for the shawl around her shoulders. Ethan, she said softly, if you've lied to me about any part of this, I will never forgive you. But if you've told me the truth, she paused, her throat tight, then I'll need your strength. Because I fear tomorrow will change everything. Ethan nodded, his eyes wet but resolute. Then we'll face it together. Margaret glanced back at the restaurant where laughter floated faintly through the windows. Her daughter's laughter, sweet and poisonous all at once, for the first time in her life. Margaret wasn't sure whether she feared losing her wealth or her family more. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She sat in her armchair, shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, the house quiet except for the steady ticking of the clock. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, his jacket pulled over him like a blanket. She studied his face in the dim light, so young, yet carrying a weight far too heavy. Her mind replayed the audio clip over and over. Claire's voice, Daniel's chuckle. Yet Daniel's words in the parking lot echoed just as loudly. He's been stealing from you. And Ethan's fumbling attempt at denial hadn't sounded entirely innocent. Margaret rose slowly, her joints stiff, and walked to the old desk by the window. She unlocked the top drawer and pulled out the ledger where she still noted expenses, just as she had done for decades. Flipping through the pages, she found it January. A withdrawal, $200. Missing from her purse. She had dismissed it at the time, assuming she'd misplaced it. Then, in February, the watch gone. She had blamed herself again. Her hand trembled on the paper. The timeline aligned with Daniel's accusations. She turned, staring at Ethan sleeping peacefully on her couch. Was he protecting her or using her? The next morning, Margaret called her attorney, Mr. Hadley, a man she had trusted since her husband's passing. She arranged a meeting at his office, insisting Ethan accompany her. When they arrived, Mr. Hadley greeted her warmly, but with a furrowed brow. Claire called me yesterday. he said carefully. She asked me to prepare transfer papers for the property. She claimed it was your wish. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. And did you? I told her not without your direct instruction, Mr. Hadley said firmly. He glanced at Ethan, then back at her. I also advised her to bring you herself, but she seemed impatient. Ethan shifted uneasily. See, Grandma? They're rushing it. Margaret lifted a hand to quiet him. Show me the documents. Mr. Hadley slid a folder across the desk. Margaret opened it, her eyes scanning the neatly typed words. There it was, her name, spaces waiting for her signature. The deed transferring ownership to Claire and Daniel. She felt a wave of nausea. It was real. Ethan hadn't lied about that. Yet something else caught her eye. A line scribbled in the margin, faint but unmistakable. She adjusted her glasses and leaned closer. The note read, "Don't let her see the draft." She hesitated. Initials followed DT. Margaret froze. She turned the page, her hands trembling. Another margin note written in the same hand. Delay until funds clear. Again, ET. She looked up sharply at Ethan, his face drained of color. Ethan, she said slowly, holding up the page. Explain this. Ethan's lips parted, but no sound came. He reached for the folder, but Margaret pulled it back. Mr. Hadley frowned deeply. I assumed those were Claire's assistant's notes. Are you telling me this is your handwriting, young man? Ethan stammered. I can explain. It's not what you think? Margaret's chest tightened. The betrayal stung like a fresh wound. She had defended him, believed him, but his initials were right there, tangled in her daughter's scheme. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "You were helping them." Ethan's shoulders slumped, his voice breaking. At first, yes, I was desperate. They promised me money if I convinced you to sign. They said you didn't care about me anyway, that I was just a burden to you. His words spilled out raw and choking. But when I saw how they talked about you, you were nothing. I couldn't go through with it. I wanted to warn you. That's why I recorded them. Margaret's heart pounded. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to cling to the image of the boy who had stood by her in the parking lot. But now the line between enemy and ally was blurred beyond recognition. Mr. Hadley leaned forward, voice firm. Mrs. Turner, we must tread carefully. Your daughter is pressing for control, but this young man has clearly played both sides. The question is, where does his loyalty lie now? Margaret turned her gaze to Ethan, his eyes brimmed with tears. His hands clenched as if holding back despair. Grandma, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I swear, I'm with you now. I made mistakes, but I couldn't betray you in the end. Please, don't give up on me. Margaret closed the folder slowly, her mind a storm of doubt and sorrow. Her daughter's greed, her grandson's confession, each revelation chipped away at the foundation of trust she had built her life upon. And yet, in that storm, one truth began to surface. The true danger was not merely losing her wealth, but losing the last fragments of her family to lies and betrayal. The following days felt like a fog Margaret couldn't escape. She avoided Claire's calls, ignored Daniel's knocks at the door, and stayed mostly in the quiet of her living room, with Ethan nearby. Yet no matter how much tea she drank, or how many times she tried to distract herself with knitting, the words at first, yes, replayed endlessly in her mind. Every glance at Ethan reminded her of betrayal and at the same time the possibility of redemption. He hovered around her with anxious care, cooking meals, fixing the loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet, bringing her morning paper before she asked. It was as if he were trying to erase the stain of his confession. But could someone truly change so quickly? On the third evening, Margaret received a letter slipped beneath her door. No envelope, no stamp, just a folded sheet of paper. She opened it with trembling hands. Margaret. It read in hurried script, "You can't trust the boy. He's playing you. Meet me tomorrow at the diner, 2 p.m., come alone." Her heart sank. The next afternoon, curiosity wrestled with fear. She told Ethan she had a doctor's appointment and took the bus to the diner. Daniel was waiting at a corner booth, his suit jacket crisp, his hair slicked back. He smiled when he saw her, but his eyes darted around nervously. "Margaret," he said, lowering his voice as she slid into the booth. "I know you don't trust me, but I swear to you, I'm not your enemy. That boy is dangerous. He's been stringing you along." Margaret frowned. "You forged documents. You and Claire pushed me to sign them." Daniel shook his head. "Yes, Claire wanted that, but me. I hesitated. I warned her you wouldn't forgive such pressure. I discovered something else. Ethan's been siphoning your bank account. Small amounts spread out so you wouldn't notice." He slid a folded printout across the table. "I pulled this from Claire's email. It's his transfer history." Margaret's pulse quickened as she unfolded the paper. Lines of numbers and dates stared back at her. Withdrawals in increments of 50, 100, times $200 every month, going to an account with Ethan's name. Her breath caught. It matched the missing cash she had brushed off as forgetfulness. Daniel leaned closer. "He's been planning this for months. He only turned on us when he realized Claire wouldn't pay him what she promised. Now he's manipulating you, playing the loyal grandson. But he's the one who stands to gain the most if you cut your daughter out of your will." Margaret felt dizzy. The room tilted, and she gripped the edge of the table. Could it be true? Had Ethan deceived her twice, first with Claire, now on his own? She left the diner in silence, Daniel's words gnawing at her. That night, she confronted Ethan. "I went to see Daniel," she said, standing stiffly in the living room. "He showed me records, transfers from my account to yours. Care to explain?" Ethan's eyes widened. "What? That's impossible." "Grandma, I never." He stopped abruptly, then ran a hand through his hair. "Wait, the account's under my name?" "Yes." His face paled. "Then Claire used me. She must have opened it with my details. She had access to my ID when I lived with her for a while last year. Don't you see? She set this up to make it look like I was stealing." Margaret's heart pounded. His words made sense, but how many times had he already twisted the truth? Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Grandma, I swear on everything I didn't take a cent. Please, you have to believe me. They're framing me." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. She wanted desperately to believe him, to believe that someone in her fractured family still saw her as more than a prize to be claimed. But the paper, the ledger, the initials in the margins, all of it screamed otherwise. That night, she lay, awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between two faces, her daughter's cold ambition and her grandson's pleading innocence. One of them was lying. One of them was about to take everything, and Margaret knew she had to make a choice soon. The storm came on a Friday night. Heavy rain battered the windows and thunder rolled like distant drums. Margaret sat alone in her armchair, the house lights dimmed, her heart pounding with the weight of indecision. A sudden knock rattled the front door. She flinched. When she opened it, Claire was standing there, drenched from the rain, her eyes blazing. "Mother, we need to talk." Margaret hesitated, then stepped aside. Claire swept into the living room, shaking water from her coat. "Enough of these games," Claire snapped. "I know you've been meeting with Daniel. I know Ethan's been filling your head with lies. You have to listen to me now, before it's too late." Margaret folded her arms. "Too late for what?" "For you to take everything." Claire's face twisted. "You think I'm the villain, don't you? But that boy, he's worse than you realize. He's been draining your savings behind your back. Daniel caught him. That's why he came to me." Margaret's stomach clenched. It's the same accusation again. Claire leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Mother, I may be ambitious. I may have wanted control of the estate, but I would never steal from you. Ethan would. He already has." At that moment, the back door slammed. Ethan burst in, water dripping from his jacket, his face pale with fury. "Don't listen to her, Grandma," he shouted. "She's lying. She's been lying from the start." "Stop it, Ethan," Claire hissed. "You're caught." Daniel showed the records. "You've been using that account for months. That's not me." Ethan's voice cracked. "She forged everything." The air in the room felt electric. Margaret's hands trembled as she reached into the drawer beside her chair. She pulled out an old envelope. One Daniel had slipped her at the diner, but she hadn't dared open until tonight. Inside was not just the bank ledger, but a second PEJA notarized confession draft, unsigned, bearing Claire's initials. Margaret's breath caught. She looked up. "Daniel gave me this. He told me to see for myself, Claire." Froze. Her face blanched. "What is that?" Ethan asked, stepping closer. Margaret read aloud, her voice shaking. "I authorized transfers in my mother's name. Funds to be moved discreetly through Ethan Carter's identity to disguise origin. This was necessary to ensure future inheritance. Control." Claire lunged forward. "That's not real. Forged it." But her voice faltered. The ink, the dates, the handwriting. Margaret recognized her daughter's penmanship. Silence fell, broken only by the rain against the glass. For the first time in weeks, Margaret saw the truth with startling clarity. Daniel had not been the snake, she thought. He had been the one quietly trying to warn her to leave breadcrumbs so she could see her daughter's deceit. And Ethan, despite his mistakes, despite his cowardice, at first had been the only one to stay by her side. Not for money, but because he feared losing the only family he had left. Claire's mask slipped. Her shoulders sagged. "Mother, I only wanted what was fair. You've always favored him. You never trusted me." Margaret's voice hardened. "Trust is earned, Claire. And you've shattered it." Ethan reached for Margaret's hand, his eyes filled with tears. "I'll stand by whatever you decide, Grandma. But just don't let her win." Margaret closed her eyes, exhaling a long, trembling breath. Then she turned to Claire. "You will leave this house tonight. I'll speak with Daniel and the authorities. If I must, Ethan stays." Claire's mouth opened, then shut. For once, she had no fight left. She turned, walked to the door, and vanished into the storm. When the house was quiet again, Margaret leaned back in her chair. Ethan knelt beside her, clutching her hand. She squeezed it gently. "Do you see now, Ethan?" she whispered. "Truth always finds its way out, no matter how deep it's buried." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. For Margaret, the pain of betrayal still burned, but beneath it flickered a fragile hope. She had lost a daughter tonight, perhaps forever, but she had regained something she thought long gone. Trust in the bond of family, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how dark the path to it. And as the storm outside finally began to break, Margaret felt, for the first time in months, the weight in her chest begin to lift. Sometimes life shows us a cruel paradox. The people we trust the most can betray us, while the ones we doubt may be the ones quietly protecting us. Margaret's story is not just about money or inheritance, it's about truth, loyalty, and the fragile bonds that hold a family together. For years, she believed she understood her daughter's heart and her grandson's flaws. She thought she could read their intentions, weigh their love against their mistakes. But the truth revealed itself in the most unexpected way. The daughter she trusted had been deceiving her, while the grandson she feared losing was the one who stood by her side. It is a painful reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the villain wears the mask of family, while the hero hides in the shadow of doubt. What matters most is not how people present themselves, but the choices they make when everything is at stake. Think for a moment. How often do we misjudge those around us? How many times have we mistaken silence for weakness or confidence for honesty? Margaret's story teaches us that the truth may be uncomfortable, but it is always worth facing. And when we do, we not only uncover lies, we rediscover the bonds that truly matter. Perhaps you have someone in your life you've misjudged. Maybe there's a relationship strained by suspicion or a trust you've withheld because of fear. Ask yourself, is there a chance that what you believe about them isn't the whole truth? Life rarely gives us perfect clarity, but it does give us moments of choice moments where we can either cling to appearances or seek the truth with courage. Margaret chose courage, and in doing so, she saved her grandson and perhaps herself from a lifetime of regret. Now we want to hear from you. What does this story mean to you? Have you ever discovered that the person you thought was your enemy turned out to be your greatest ally, or the other way around? Share your story in the comments below. And if Margaret's journey moved you, consider subscribing to Real Moments. Every week, we share true stories that remind us of the complexity of life, the fragility of trust, and the enduring power of redemption. Because in the end, truth has a way of breaking through the storm, and when it does, it changes everything.